What is up, Hawk fans? Got a little bit of news for you guys. I saw it this morning, Sunday morning. Um, Cooper Koch, aka Cooper Koch, aka Cooper Koch, is returning to Iowa. This is definitely big news. I had him when I listed, all the Iowa Hawkeye players that entered the transfer portal. I think I had Josh Dix 1, Owen Freeman 2, Price Sanford 3, and I think I had Cooper and Brock interchangeable because Brock is a little bit further along at this point in time, and I do like his game and actually think that Brock Harding has some long-term possibilities due to the way he plays, and he doesn't get credit for the athleticism that he has at his size. I am going to miss Brock Harding as a point guard at Iowa. I really did want to see him fulfill his talents at the University of Iowa. He probably was, just from a pure point guard standpoint, one of my favorite Iowa point guards, not necessarily because of his production, although it at various points this year it was actually pretty solid. He probably would be up there as my favorite. I mean, if you think about the Fran McCaffrey era, you had Jordan Bohannon. He definitely was not my favorite, just because I think with Jordan Bohannon, yes, you got a lot of you definitely got some good things in some big moments, but you also had a lot of things that you lacked with him. If he wasn't hitting 3-point shots, if he wasn't knocking down 3-point shots, he struggled on the defensive end. He was a liability on the defensive end. He wasn't a super creative point guard as far as getting into the lane and stuff like that. I mean, of course, now I don't want to turn this into a Jordan Bohannon situation. And don't get me wrong, that dude had ice in his veins and definitely hit some big shots for Iowa and won quite a few games for Iowa. You had Mike Gazelle, Anthony Clemens, I guess you could count in that arena. Tony Perkins, you might be able to count in that arena. I think he had a solid first year. Brock Harding, obviously. Trying to think if there was any other names. I mean, the thing is it's not really that many Iowa point guards, considering all the Iowa point guards basically stayed at Iowa for 4 or 5 years. Jordan Bohannon, Mike Gazelle, that's 10 years right there. So anyways, Cooper Koch is up there. It's not the most sexy pickup as of this moment. Like I said, there's some other names that I think are maybe a little bit bigger. Obviously the ones that are still on the board, Price Sanford and Josh Dix, obviously. Owen Freeman and Brock Harding, I don't think we're ever going to return back to Iowa. I think there was a good chance, even if Fran McCaffrey returned, that both those guys were going to take their talents elsewhere. So as far as Cooper goes, like I said, not the most sexy pickup, but it's a step in the right direction. I mean, as of this moment, Cooper, was one of the highest rated guys that Fran McCaffrey recruited in the Iowa era. Definitely not the highest recruited, but up there. I'd say top 10, easy top 10 rated recruits in the Fran McCaffrey era. I think it's cool that he's going to come back and help a school that's important to his family kind of facilitate a resurgence or transition of power between the Fran McCaffrey era to the Ben McCollum era. So it'll be interesting to see what he's able to do then. Obviously, his undisclosed injury was a bit of a concern. I'm still not sold that it was an injury. I've kind of had the inkling that it was kind of maybe more of like an emotional or mental thing, but nonetheless, it's undisclosed. And I do think that he has high upside. He's 6'8", 6'9". Guys like that don't grow on trees. He's got a high basketball IQ. He's a great shooter. It's a great spot for Ben McCollum to start building his team. If you look at Ben McCollum's team right now, the three guys that he still has on the four guys that he still has on the roster, you have Miami transfer Isaiah Johnson-Arigu, you have Seydou Traore, you have Stitz, of course, or Sturt, sorry, Bennett Sturts, of course, which is a huge pickup. He might be the best point guard in the country heading into next year. And now you have Cooper Koch. I think that this is a good foundation. We'll see if Seydou Traore ends up deciding to put his name in the transfer portal. I don't think he will. But I also thought the same thing for Chris Tadjo. Given how long it took, I thought basically if the guys were going to enter the transfer portal, they were going to do it almost immediately, like most of the Iowa players did. But it's a good foundation, and there's some Drake guys that are likely to come to Iowa. I can immediately foresee a roster that's going to be ready to compete and be competitive in the Big Ten, especially in a sport like basketball. Anytime you have an elite player like Bennett Sturts, you're going to have a chance. Now, the biggest thing as of right now with this Iowa basketball team is they don't have a ton of proven guys. Cooper Koch is aka Cooper Koch, is still somewhat unproven. We saw a little bit of what he has to offer, and he was decent in spells. But still, we haven't seen a full season of action from him. Seydou Traore, we did get to see a lot of him, but we didn't see his fullness of his game and what his game can become. But he's athletic. He plays hard. He can defend. He's 6'7". And Isaiah Johnson-Arigu, I think, is kind of in a similar vein as Seydou Traore. So as of names still on the board, I mentioned the Drake guys that entered the transfer portal. I don't think it's a guarantee that they're going to come to Iowa, but I think it's a good chance. At least two of them, if not all the guys that we've seen. It'll also depend on if Ben McCollum, thinks that they can play at the Big Ten level, or whether he thinks that he can get an upgrade with those guys. Ultimately, that's absolutely up to Ben McCollum. And if I'm him and I think that I can get guys that are an upgrade and more talented, then I would absolutely go for it. Now, I'm sure there's one or two names from his Drake team that defeated Missouri that he sees as guys that it's going to be hard to find an upgrade for. So, and then as far as Iowa guys, I think, Chris Tadjo, depending on if Ben McCollum sees him as a priority, I think that's an easy guy for Iowa to land. But I also find it strange that he decided to hit the transfer portal after Ben McCollum got there. He did say that he was open to returning to Iowa. But I just really like his frame, his size, his athleticism. I think that he is a guy, much like what Fran McCaffrey saw, that can be molded into a solid Big Ten contributor. And again, 6'8" athletes with size like that do not grow on trees. I think there's a good chance Iowa will be able to get Lajai Dembele back. And Iowa still has a shot with Josh Dix. I'm not confident it's going to happen. I'm not even willing to put it above 50% at this point, because there's some big-time programs after his services, as I knew there would be. And, man, am I more... How often do I get vindicated when it comes to my assessment of basketball talent? I told you guys dating back to last year, the beginning of last year, hell, even 2 years ago, that Josh Dix was an emerging talent. And man, it's really nice to see that come to fruition. It would be huge if he came back to Iowa. I think Iowa would immediately be in the conversation for like a top 7, top 5 Big Ten team, because you already have Bennett Sturts. Your top end talent would be really strong. Now, of course, you would need to round out the talent, but still, I digress. I think Iowa has a good chance to get Price Sanfort back. I would put that above 50%. Not a guarantee, but I would give them a good chance. So, to me, if Iowa can land, 2 of the Drake guys and at least 2 of the remaining Iowa Hawkeyes on the board, preferably, I would say it's kind of hard for me to decide between Chris Taggio and Lajai Dembele, because I think Chris Taggio has more upside than Lajai Dembele, but I think Lajai is a little bit further ahead right now. But as long as one of them is Josh Dix or Price Sanfort, I think it's a toss-up between Lajai and Chris. Preferably it'd be both. But as long as it's one, at least one between Josh Dix and Price Sanford, I think Iowa will be in really good shape. All right, guys, there you guys have it. Cooper Koch returning to Iowa. It's a great pickup, as I said. Not the most sexy, but it's up there. He's got a ton of upside. He's a shooter. You're always going to need shooting. Ben McCollum really likes shooting. So this is positive. And so far, we're seeing Ben McCollum able to close it and get the job done, as he's already landed 2 solid pickups upon his arrival at Iowa. So things are looking up, Hawk fans. And I know all the Iowa Hawkeye fans that I have seen that live where I live are super excited about the future of Iowa basketball. They're super excited about Ben McCollum. I think the apathy around Iowa men's basketball is subsiding, which kind of is the point. That kind of was the whole point on why Fran McCaffrey was fired. And I think myself and maybe Locked On Hawkeyes were the only content creators that kind of were putting that out there, that the fan base was this apathetic towards Iowa men's basketball. So here we are. That's why the change was made. I will be starting to talk about Iowa football more. There hasn't been a ton of news. The 2 deeps were dropped. Maybe I might reference that. It's hard for me to put forward any sort of discussion around 2 deeps this early in the season, because let's just be honest, Kirk Ferentz don't give a gosh darn about 2 deeps, they're not the end all be all. So if Kirk doesn't care, it's hard for me to care. So, but once there's something to talk about, I'll definitely get you guys some content, and we'll keep it pushing forward. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share. You guys know the drill. Smash the subscribe button, obviously. And last but not least, DBAP. Don't be a pussy, Willow. In fact, your feelings, because your feelings just matter. Love you, Hawk fans. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.